The maid helped a millionaire motorcyclist. A week later, her life changed forever. Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The rhythmic swish of Elena Ramirez's mop against the polished marble floor of Manhattan's Grayson Tower was almost meditative. At 5:30 in the morning, the prestigious office building was her domain, a quiet kingdom of emptiness where her thoughts could wander freely while her hands worked with practiced precision. 2 more floors, and I can catch the 6:45 bus, she murmured to herself, tucking a wayward strand of dark hair back under her company-issued cap. Overnight cleaning shifts weren't glamorous, but they paid better than daytime hours and allowed the 28-year-old to attend community college classes in the afternoon. Besides, Elena had always been a morning person. When she'd left her hometown of Albuquerque 3 years ago with dreams of becoming a physical therapist, she hadn't anticipated spending so many pre-dawn hours with only her mop and cleaning cart for company. But life in New York City had proven more expensive and complicated than expected. Still, Eleanor refused to give up. Her mother hadn't raised a quitter. The cleaning cart's wheels squeaked persistently as she pushed it toward the elevator. It was a familiar sound, one of many that formed the soundtrack to her working hours, alongside the hum of the floor polisher, the spray of glass cleaner, and her own quiet humming of whatever song was stuck in her head that day. Today, it was Empire State of Mind, which felt a little on the nose, but the song had been playing at the bodega, where she'd grabbed coffee before her shift, and now the chorus was looping endlessly in her mind. Elena checked her watch. 5:45. She was ahead of schedule. If she finished the executive suite on the top floor within the hour, she could stop by the library before her anatomy and physiology class. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ping, and she wheeled her cart inside, pressing the button for the 40th floor. As the elevator began its ascent, Elena leaned against the wall and closed her eyes briefly. She was tired, bone-tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. The kind of tired that came from constantly swimming upstream, from sending money home to help her mother with medical bills while stretching her own budget to breaking point, from smiling politely when executives walked past her as if she were invisible, from dating men who lost interest when they discovered her irregular schedule and modest income. The elevator stopped suddenly on the 32nd floor, jarring Elena from her thoughts. The doors opened to reveal a man who looked as out of place in the pristine corporate building as a wolf in a china shop. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders beneath a black leather motorcycle jacket that had seen better days. His dark hair was windswept, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But what caught Elena's attention was the way he was limping, one hand pressed against his side, the other clutching a motorcycle helmet. Their eyes met, his an intense shade of blue that contrasted sharply with his tanned skin and dark features, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then he winced, swaying slightly. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, instinctively moving forward. "Fine," he replied, his voice strained as he stepped into the elevator. "Just need to get to my—" He didn't finish the sentence, grimacing instead as the doors closed behind him. Elena noticed a tear in his jeans, and beneath it what looked suspiciously like blood. "You're hurt," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "It's nothing. Laid down my bike on 5th Avenue. Some idiot in an SUV cut me off." He tried to straighten up, but another flash of pain crossed his face. "Happens sometimes." "That doesn't look like nothing," Elena said, pointing to his leg. Her first aid training from her physical therapy courses kicked in. "You need to clean that wound. Road rash can get infected quickly." He gave her an assessing look. "You a doctor?" Physical therapy student," she replied, then added with a self-deprecating smile, "and professional cleaner. I know about sanitizing things." The elevator continued its upward journey, the numbers lighting up sequentially on the panel. The man leaned against the wall, trying to appear casual despite his obvious discomfort. Elena couldn't help but notice that beneath the disheveled appearance, he was remarkably handsome, with angular features and those striking blue eyes. "Which floor?" she asked. "40th. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Executive level? At 6 in the morning?" He gave her a crooked smile that transformed his face, softening the intensity. "I keep odd hours." "That makes 2 of us," she murmured as the elevator continued its ascent. When they reached the 40th floor, the doors opened to reveal a reception area Eleanor knew well. She cleaned it 5 days a week. The gleaming wood-paneled walls, abstract artwork and plush seating area were familiar territory to her, but she'd never seen anyone else there at this hour. The man limped forward, then paused, glancing back at Elena. Something flickered in his expression, hesitation perhaps, or curiosity. "You said you know about first aid?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Basic stuff, yes." He seemed to debate with himself for a moment, then gestured toward a door on the right. "My office is just down there. I've got a first aid kit, but I can't exactly see the back of my leg." Eleanor hesitated. Helping an injured person seemed like the right thing to do, but she also had a schedule to maintain, and being alone with a stranger, even an injured one, wasn't exactly following safety protocols. As if reading her thoughts, he added, "Security cameras everywhere up here, and I promise I'm not an axe murderer. Just a guy who made a bad decision trying to beat the morning traffic." There was something disarming about his wry humor and the way he didn't try to hide his pain. Against her better judgment, Elena found herself wheeling her cart forward. "Fine. But make it quick. I have 2 more floors to finish before my shift ends." "Appreciate it," he said, leading the way down the corridor. He moved with obvious difficulty, but refused to accept her offer of support. The office he led her to wasn't what she expected. Instead of the sterile corporate spaces she typically cleaned, this room had character. Motorcycle models displayed on shelves, engineering diagrams pinned to walls, and large windows offering a breathtaking view of the city awakening below. A sleek desk dominated one side of the room, covered in papers and what looked like prototype designs. "First aid kits in the bathroom," he said, gesturing to a door in the corner. "Through there." Elena retrieved the kit, returning to find the man perched awkwardly on the edge of his desk, examining the tear in his jeans. "You should probably take those off," she said matter-of-factly, then immediately felt her cheeks warm at how that sounded. "I mean, I can't clean the wound properly through the fabric." A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Normally I'd at least ask for your name before dropping my pants." "Elena," she said, focusing on opening the first aid kit rather than meeting his gaze. "Elena Ramirez." "Jack Grayson," he replied, wincing as he carefully removed his jacket. "Wish we were meeting under better circumstances, Elena Ramirez." The name registered a moment later, and Elena's hands froze over the antiseptic wipes. Grayson, as in Grayson Tower. As in Grayson Motors, the electric motorcycle company whose logo adorned the building's entrance. "You're," she began, but couldn't quite finish the sentence. "The idiot who crashed his prototype bike, testing a new suspension system at 5 in the morning?" he offered with a self-deprecating grin. "Guilty as charged." Elena's mind raced. She was standing in the office of Jack Grayson, founder and CEO of one of the most innovative electric vehicle companies in the country. The 35-year-old entrepreneur, whose face occasionally graced business magazines and technology websites. The man whose building she cleaned, but had never expected to actually meet. "I can call a doctor," she suggested, suddenly feeling out of her depth. "Someone with actual medical training." Jack shook his head. "And have the board find out I was test riding without the safety team?" "No thanks." He carefully stood and turned so she could see the back of his leg. "It's just road rash. I've had worse." The wound wasn't as bad as Elena had feared, a nasty scrape running along his calf, but not deep enough to require stitches. With professional detachment that belied her inner turmoil, she cleaned the area with antiseptic wipes, applied antibiotic ointment, and covered it with gauze. You should really have this properly examined, she advised, securing the bandage, and watch for signs of infection, increased redness, warmth, swelling. Yes, ma'am, Jack replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in that crooked smile again. You're good at this. Basic first aid, Elena said with a shrug, packing up the supplies. Nothing special. Seemed pretty special to me. There was something in his voice, a sincerity that caught her off guard. Their eyes met again, and for a moment the vast differences in their circumstances seemed to fade away. Then Elena glanced at her watch, and reality came rushing back. I need to finish my shift, she said, closing the first aid kit with a snap. Make sure you clean that again tonight. Jack nodded, watching her with an unreadable expression as she gathered her things. Thank you, Elena. Not everyone would have stopped to help. Anyone would have done the same, she replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. Can I, he began, then paused. Can I at least buy you coffee sometime, to say thanks properly? Elena hesitated. In another life, one where she wasn't his employee, where the gulf between their worlds wasn't so vast, perhaps she would have said yes. But reality was reality. That's not necessary, she said, moving toward the door with her cart. Just be more careful on that bike. Jack didn't push, but as she reached the doorway, he called after her. Elena, you're not invisible. She turned back, confused. What? You said your name earlier like you didn't expect me to remember it, like you're used to being overlooked. His expression was serious now, those blue eyes intent. You're not invisible. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in Elena's chest, but she tamped it down quickly. This wasn't a movie, and fairy tales didn't happen to women who cleaned office buildings at dawn. Goodbye, Mr. Grayson, she said formally, and wheeled her cart out the door. As she finished her shift, Elena told herself the encounter meant nothing. By this time tomorrow, Jack Grayson would have forgotten all about the cleaner who had bandaged his leg. Men like him moved in different orbits, their paths rarely intersecting with people like her for more than a moment. What she couldn't have known, as she caught the 6:45 bus home that morning, was that their paths were destined to cross again, and that when they did, her carefully ordered life would be turned completely upside down. Exactly 1 week after her unusual encounter with Jack Grayson, Elena was elbow-deep in soapy water at her second job. The small diner in Queens where she worked weekend shifts was packed with the Saturday morning breakfast crowd, and a stack of dishes had accumulated faster than she could wash them. Order up for table 7. Marlene, the 60-something waitress with bottle-red hair and a cigarette-roughened voice, called out as she slapped another ticket on the counter. "Coming!" Elena replied, wiping her hands on her apron and reaching for the plates of pancakes and eggs that Luis, the short-order cook, had just finished preparing. The diner, affectionately named Queen's Comfort by its owner, though the sign outside simply read Diner in flickering neon, was a far cry from the gleaming corporate towers where Elena spent her weekday mornings. Here, the floors were perpetually sticky despite her best efforts. The vinyl booths were patched with duct tape, and the air was heavy with the scent of bacon grease and maple syrup. But the tips were decent, the staff felt like family, and the flexible schedule accommodated her classes. "When you're done with that table, can you take a coffee to the guy in booth 12? Marlene asked, applying another coat of her signature coral lipstick, using a compact mirror. "Been waiting there about 10 minutes reading the menu like it's War and Peace." Elena nodded, expertly balancing 3 plates along her arm as she navigated through the crowded diner. She served the family at table 7, parents trying to manage 2 energetic children under the age of 8, before grabbing a coffee pot and heading toward booth 12 in the far corner. The man was facing away from her, his attention focused on the laminated menu. All she could see was the back of his head, dark hair that looked like it had been repeatedly run through with fingers, and broad shoulders beneath a casual grey Henley. "Coffee?" Elena asked, already pouring before he could respond. It was nearly 11 in the morning. Everyone wanted coffee. "Thank you," he replied, and the familiar voice made her hand freeze mid-pour. Jack Grayson looked up from the menu, and recognition dawned in his eyes immediately. The coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim of the mug. "Elena," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Elena Ramirez." She stared at him, coffee pot still hovering. This made no sense. Jack Grayson, CEO of Grayson Motors, didn't eat at diners in Queens with cracked vinyl seats and faded photographs of New York landmarks on the walls. Men who owned buildings in Manhattan had private chefs, or at the very least expense accounts at Michelin-starred restaurants. "What are you doing here?" The question slipped out before she could filter it. A flash of amusement crossed his features. "Having breakfast, or at least attempting to." He gestured to the menu. "What do you recommend?" Elena finally remembered to set down the coffee pot, still trying to process his unexpected appearance. "The blueberry pancakes are good," she answered automatically. "But seriously, how did you find this place? How did you find me?" Jack took a sip of his coffee, wincing slightly at the heat or possibly the strength. Queen's Comfort didn't serve the artisanal, single-origin brews that Elena imagined someone like him was accustomed to. "Would you believe me if I said it was a coincidence?" he asked. "No," Elena replied flatly, crossing her arms. He sighed, setting down his mug. "Fair enough. I wanted to thank you properly for last week. When you weren't on the cleaning crew yesterday morning, I asked around. Someone mentioned you worked weekends here." The idea that Jack Grayson had been asking about her was both flattering and alarming. "So you tracked me down? That's not creepy at all. When you put it that way, it does sound stalkerish," he conceded with a grimace. I didn't like how we left things. You helped me, and I didn't even properly thank you." Elena was saved from responding by Marlene's pointed throat-clearing from behind the counter. "If you're done chatting up the customers, table 4 needs their check," the older woman called out. "I have to work," Elena said, already backing away. "Enjoy your blueberry pancakes, Mr. Grayson." "Jack," he corrected, "and I haven't ordered yet." "Blueberry pancakes with a side of bacon," she said decisively. "Trust me." Then she turned and hurried back to the counter, feeling his eyes on her as she went. For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor deliberately kept herself busy, taking orders, delivering food, and washing dishes with single-minded focus. She assigned Marlene to deliver Jack's pancakes when they were ready, ignoring the older woman's raised eyebrow and knowing smirk. "Your boyfriend's still waiting," Marlene commented as she rang up a customer's bill. "Finished eating 20 minutes ago. Just nursing that coffee and checking his fancy watch." "He's not my boyfriend," Elena muttered. "He's a client from my other job." "Honey, men who look like that and drive motorcycles worth more than my annual salary don't just show up for pancakes," Marlene replied with a wink. "He's been watching you like you're the last slice of pie at Thanksgiving." Elena glanced over and, sure enough, caught Jack's gaze before he quickly returned his attention to his phone. The sleek motorcycle parked outside, which he'd been too busy to notice earlier, suddenly made sense. Of course he wouldn't arrive in a chauffeur-driven town car. That would have been too conventional. "My shift ends in 15 minutes, Elena said, more to herself than to Marlene. "If I hide in the storage room, do you think he'll leave?" Marlene cackled. "Not a chance, sweetheart. Men like that are used to getting what they want." She patted Elena's shoulder. "But they're also used to women falling at their feet, so it wouldn't hurt to make him work for it a little." "There's nothing to work for," Elena insisted. "We're from completely different worlds." Honey, every good love story starts with 'we're from completely different worlds,'" Marlene replied with the wisdom of someone who had seen enough romantic comedies to consider herself an expert. Before Eleanor could protest further, Luis rang the bell for another order, and she gratefully escaped to the kitchen. By the time she emerged, however, Jack was waiting at the register, bill in hand. "Best pancakes I've had in a long time," he said, as she reluctantly approached the cash register. "You were right. We have good pancakes," Elena agreed, taking his bill and the credit card he offered. The black card felt unusually heavy in her hand. The kind of exclusive credit card that people like her only saw in movies. As she ran his card, an awkward silence stretched between them. Jack broke it first. "My leg's healing well," he said, "thanks to your excellent first aid skills." "Glad to hear it," Elena replied, handing back his card and receipt. "Though you really should have had a doctor look at it." "I did, actually. Followed your advice." He signed the receipt with a quick scrawl. "She said you did a good job." Elena wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and placed his signed receipt in the register. "Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Mr. Grayson." "Jack," he corrected again, making no move to leave. "And actually, I was hoping to talk to you for a few minutes. When does your shift end?" Elena glanced at the clock. "About now, but I have studying to do." "I'll only take 10 minutes of your time," he promised. "Please?" There was something in his expression, a mixture of determination and what almost looked like nervousness, that made Elena hesitate. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. 10 minutes. Let me get my things." 5 minutes later, they were sitting in a small park across from the diner. The mid-April day was surprisingly warm, trees budding with early spring green, a welcome change from the long New York winter. Elena perched on the edge of a bench, still wearing her diner uniform under her light jacket, while Jack sat beside her, looking oddly out of place and perfectly at ease at the same time. "So," Elena prompted when he didn't immediately speak, "you tracked me down to say thank you? You could have left a note with my supervisor at Grayson Tower." Jack ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a habit when he was thinking. "That wouldn't have seemed personal enough." "Personal?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "We barely know each other. That's actually why I'm here." He turned slightly to face her better. "I have a proposition for you." Elena immediately stiffened. "A proposition?" she repeated flatly. Seeing her expression, Jack's eyes widened. "Not like that. God, no. That's not—" He stopped, took a breath, and started again. "I'm explaining this all wrong." "You think?" Elena was already gathering her bag, preparing to leave. "Please just hear me out," Jack said quickly. "It's a professional opportunity, completely legitimate." Something in his earnest tone made Elena pause. "You have 9 minutes left. Make them count." Jack nodded, visibly collecting his thoughts. "I was impressed by your knowledge of first aid and the way you handled yourself last week. You mentioned you're studying physical therapy." "Yes," Elena confirmed cautiously. "At Queen's Community College. I'm in my second year." "The thing is," Jack continued, "Grayson Motors is expanding our research department. We're developing a new line of adaptive motorcycles for riders with physical disabilities. Part of that involves understanding ergonomics, physical limitations, and rehabilitation processes." Eleanor's interest was piqued despite her wariness. "That sounds innovative. It's something I'm passionate about," Jack said, and the enthusiasm in his voice seemed genuine. "My brother was injured in Afghanistan, lost his left leg below the knee. He was a rider before his deployment, and getting back on a bike was a huge part of his recovery, both physically and mentally. But the modifications we had to make to his motorcycle were extensive and expensive." The personal connection surprised Elena. Somehow, she hadn't imagined someone like Jack Grayson having a disabled veteran brother or the kind of empathy that would drive him to create solutions for others in similar situations. "That's admirable," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But what does this have to do with me?" "We're assembling a consulting team, medical professionals, engineers, and people with first-hand experience of physical disabilities. We need someone with knowledge of physical therapy to help us understand how our designs might impact rehabilitation and daily function." He paused. "It would be a part-time position, flexible hours, and the pay would be substantially better than cleaning offices or waiting tables." Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "Are you offering me a job? I'm not even a licensed physical therapist yet." "You're a student in the field, which means you have current knowledge of the latest techniques and approaches," Jack replied. "Your perspective would be valuable. And yes, I'm offering you a job. A legitimate professional position with benefits and everything. The opportunity sounded almost too good to be true. A flexible, well-paying job in her field of study. The kind of experience that would look incredible on her resume. But suspicion still lingered. "Why me, really?" she asked bluntly. "There must be dozens of qualified physical therapy students or actual licensed therapists you could hire." Jack's expression grew more serious. "Because in the 5 minutes you spent helping me, you showed more competence, directness, and genuine care than many professionals I've encountered. You weren't intimidated by me, you didn't sugarcoat anything, and you clearly know what you're doing." He held her gaze steadily. "And yes, I admit I'm also intrigued by someone who can efficiently clean a 40-story building, work in a busy diner, attend college, and still find time to help a stranger who crashed his motorcycle." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught Elena off guard. It had been a long time since anyone had really seen her, not just the uniform she wore or the service she provided, but her as a person with skills and value beyond her labor. "I don't know," she said finally. "It seems complicated." "Life is complicated," Jack replied with a small smile. "But sometimes good opportunities come from unexpected places." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, offering it to her. "Think about it. My direct number is on there. The position starts in 2 weeks, which would give you time to adjust your schedule if you're interested." Elena hesitated before taking the card. The heavy cardstock felt significant between her fingers, embossed with the Grayson Motors logo and Jack's name. "No pressure," he added, standing up, "but I hope you'll consider it." As he turned to leave, Elena found herself calling after him. Was this really just about a job offer? Jack paused, looking back at her with that now familiar crooked smile. "Mostly. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also hoping to see you again under better circumstances than bleeding in an elevator or stalking you at your diner." Before Elena could formulate a response to that disarmingly honest admission, he continued, "Your 10 minutes are up. I know you have studying to do. Thanks for hearing me out, Elena." She watched as he walked back to his motorcycle, unable to shake the feeling that accepting his card had somehow altered the trajectory of her carefully planned life. The sensible thing would be to tuck the card away and forget about the encounter, to stick with her current jobs, finish her degree on schedule, and not complicate things with whatever this was. But as Jack started his motorcycle, the electric engine emitting only a soft whir rather than the roar she expected, Elena found herself already wondering what it might be like to work at Grayson Motors, to contribute to something meaningful, to be valued for her knowledge rather than just her labor. The business card seemed to burn in her pocket as she gathered her things and headed toward the subway station. She had a full afternoon of studying ahead, followed by laundry and meal prep for the week. Her life was scheduled down to the hour. It had to be, to make everything fit. There was no room for unexpected job offers or handsome CEOs with crooked smiles and passionate projects. And yet, as the subway rattled toward her small apartment in Astoria, Elena found herself reaching for her phone and saving Jack Grayson's number in her contacts. Just in case. "You're going to wear a hole in my floor," remarked Tina, Elena's roommate, as she observed Elena pacing back and forth in their small apartment living room. "What's with the fancy clothes anyway? I thought you had a job interview, not a date." Elena paused in front of the smudged full-length mirror they'd rescued from a sidewalk sale last summer. The charcoal pencil skirt and burgundy blouse she'd splurged on at a consignment shop looked professional enough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing dress-up. "It's a professional position at Grayson Motors," Elena explained, for what felt like the 20th time. "I can't exactly show up in my cleaning uniform or diner apron." Tina, a nursing student who worked nights at New York Presbyterian, lounged on their second-hand couch in scrubs, scrolling through her phone. "I still think it's weird that the CEO personally offered you a job." That kind of thing doesn't happen in real life. Trust me, I know, Elena replied, slipping on the only pair of heels she owned, basic black pumps she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 3 years ago. But the company is legitimate. I researched the position and the salary is... She shook her head, still unable to believe the figure Jack had mentioned during their phone call 2 days ago. Life-changing, Tina supplied with a smirk. Exactly. Elena checked her watch, a practical timepiece that had been a graduation gift from her mother. I should go. The interview is at 10 and I want to be early. Tina finally set down her phone and gave Elena her full attention. You know I'm just looking out for you, right? Ever since Roberto left you high and dry last year, you've been all work and no play. I don't want to see you get hurt again. Elena softened, recognizing the genuine concern behind her friend's teasing. This is strictly professional, Tina. No matter how charming Jack Grayson might be, I'm not mixing business with pleasure. I've learned that lesson. Charming, huh? Tina's eyebrows shot up. You didn't mention that part before. Forget I said anything, Elena replied, grabbing her worn leather satchel that served as both school bag and purse. Wish me luck. Break a leg, Tina called after her. And if he tries anything funny, remember what I taught you about vulnerable pressure points. Elena smiled as she closed the apartment door behind her. Tina's overprotectiveness was one of the things she loved most about her roommate, even if it sometimes felt excessive. The spring morning was crisp and sunny as Elena made her way to the subway station. For once, the trains ran on schedule, and she arrived at Grayson Tower with 20 minutes to spare. This time, she entered through the gleaming main lobby rather than the service entrance she typically used for her cleaning shifts. The security guard at the front desk, a friendly older man named Henry, whom Eleanor often chatted with during her breaks, did a double take when he saw her approach. Ms. Ramirez almost didn't recognize you without your uniform, he said with a warm smile. What brings you to the fancy entrance today? Job interview, Elena replied, suddenly feeling self-conscious. In the research department. Henry's eyebrows rose, but his smile widened. Well, good for you. Always said you were too smart to be pushing a mop for the rest of your life. He winked as he handed her a visitor's badge. 30th floor. They're expecting you. The elevator ride was a surreal experience. Instead of her cleaning cart and uniform, Eleanor stood among suited executives and stylish administrative staff, trying not to fidget with her satchel or second-guess her decision to come. When the doors opened on the 30th floor, Elena stepped into a space that looked nothing like the corporate offices she cleaned each morning. The research department of Grayson Motors occupied an open-concept floor with exposed brick walls, large windows, and various workstations where people in casual attire were huddled around prototypes, computer screens, and whiteboards covered in diagrams. Elena Ramirez, a tall woman with a sleek silver bob and tortoiseshell glasses, approached, hand extended. I'm Dr. Vivian Chen, Head of Research and Development. Welcome to our playground. Elena shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Chen. Jack speaks highly of your practical knowledge and no-nonsense approach, Dr. Chen said, leading Elena through the bustling workspace. We could use more of that around here. Too many theorists, not enough practitioners. They passed various stations where engineers and designers were working on what appeared to be motorcycle components, specialized safety gear, and computer simulations. Elena caught glimpses of prosthetic limbs and adaptive controls that must have been part of the project Jack had described. Our team is developing what we believe will be the world's most accessible line of electric motorcycles, Dr. Chen explained as they walked. Adaptive controls, customizable ergonomics, and safety systems specifically designed for riders with various physical limitations. It's groundbreaking work. It sounds incredible, Elena replied sincerely. I had no idea this kind of innovation was happening. Dr. Chen smiled. Most people still think of motorcycles as inherently dangerous and inaccessible. We're changing that narrative. She paused outside a glass-walled conference room. Jack should be joining us shortly. In the meantime, let's talk about your background and what you might bring to our team. The interview with Dr. Chen was thorough but surprisingly comfortable. The older woman asked insightful questions about Eleanor's coursework, her understanding of physical rehabilitation principles, and her perspective on mobility challenges. Elena found herself relaxing as they discussed adaptive equipment she'd learned about in her classes, and her experiences helping her grandmother recover from hip replacement surgery. "You have practical insight that many of our highly credentialed consultants lack," Dr. Chen remarked, making notes on a tablet. "Sometimes expertise comes from life experience rather than academic degrees." Before Elena could respond, the conference room door opened, and Jack Grayson entered. Today, he was dressed in dark jeans and a navy button-down with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, casual by CEO standards, but more polished than the leather jacket and Henley she'd seen him in previously. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his gaze meeting Elena's briefly before turning to Dr. Chen. "Board meeting ran over." "We've been having a productive conversation," Dr. Chen replied, sliding her tablet toward Jack. "Ms. Ramirez has an impressive grasp of functional rehabilitation concepts despite being early in her formal education." Jack glanced at the notes, then smiled at Elena. "I'm not surprised. How are you finding our little innovation hub?" "It's not what I expected," Elena admitted. "It feels more like a workshop than a corporate office." "That's by design," Jack said, taking a seat across from her. "The best ideas don't come from people in suits sitting in sterile boardrooms. They come from getting your hands dirty and solving real problems." For the next 30 minutes, Jack and Dr. Chen outlined the specific role they envisioned for Elena, a part-time consultant who would review designs from a rehabilitation perspective, participate in user testing sessions, and contribute to the development of training materials for physical therapists who might work with future riders. "The position is 16 hours per week," Dr. Chen explained, "with flexibility to accommodate your class schedule. The salary is $70,000 annually, prorated for part-time hours, plus benefits." Eleanor struggled to maintain her composure at the figure. It was more than double what she currently earned from both her jobs combined for fewer hours of work. "That's very generous," she managed to say. "It's market rate for specialized consultation," Jack replied matter-of-factly. "We value expertise appropriately." As Dr. Chen continued explaining the details of the position, Elena couldn't help but wonder if this was really happening. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been mopping floors in this very building, invisible to most of its occupants. Now she was being offered a position that could transform her financial situation and provide invaluable experience in her chosen field. "Do you have any questions for us?" Dr. Chen asked, concluding her overview. Elena hesitated before asking the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you create this position now? Has something changed in the project timeline?" Jack and Dr. Chen exchanged a glance that Elena couldn't quite interpret. "Perceptive question," Jack said. "Yes, we recently secured a major contract with the Veterans Administration to develop customized motorcycles for their rehabilitation programs. The timeline has accelerated, and we realized we needed additional perspective from someone with rehabilitation knowledge. So this isn't..." Elena searched for the right words. "This isn't a position created specifically for me." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but Jack answered without hesitation. "The need is genuine. The fact that I discovered you had the right background through our unusual meeting was serendipitous, but not the motivation for creating the role." Elena nodded, oddly relieved. The last thing she wanted was charity disguised as opportunity. "In that case," she said, straightening in her chair, "I'd like to accept the position." Dr. Chen smiled. "Excellent. I'll have HR prepare the paperwork." She stood, gathering her materials. "If you'll excuse me, I have another meeting. Jack can show you around the rest of the facility, and introduce you to some of the team members you'll be working with." After Dr. Chen departed, a brief silence fell over the conference room. Jack leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. "About 50 per minute," Elena admitted with a small laugh. "This is all happening very quickly." "Too quickly?" Elena considered the question seriously. "Maybe, but sometimes opportunities don't arrive on a convenient schedule." Jack nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Spoken like someone who understands that life rarely follows a perfect plan." "Speaking of plans," Elena said, "I should give notice at my other jobs. When would you want me to start?" "We can be flexible," Jack replied. 2 weeks, that should give you time to transition." Elena nodded, already mentally rearranging her schedule. "I can make that work." "Good." Jack stood. "Let me introduce you to some of the team before you go." As they exited the conference room, Eleanor was acutely aware of curious glances from around the workspace. She wondered what the others had been told about her, or what they might assume, seeing her with the CEO. Jack seemed oblivious to the attention as he led her toward a workstation, where a man with prosthetic legs was examining a motorcycle seat mounted on some kind of testing rig. "Mike Lewis," Jack said by way of introduction, "former Marine, Paralympic athlete, and our lead test rider. Mike, this is Elena Ramirez, the physical therapy consultant I mentioned." Mike looked up, his handshake firm and his smile genuine. "About time we got someone who knows how the body actually works, instead of just how it should work according to textbooks." Elena liked him immediately. "I'm still learning, but I'm happy to contribute what I can." "She's being modest," Jack interjected. "Elena patched me up after I laid down the streak prototype, testing the new suspension." Mike rolled his eyes. Translation, after he crashed trying to see how fast he could take a corner on wet pavement. "It was for science," Jack protested with mock indignation. "It was because you're an adrenaline junkie who never grew up," Mike retorted, but the affection in his tone was evident. He turned back to Elena. "Don't let his fancy title fool you. Under the CEO veneer, he's just a gearhead with expensive toys." Elena couldn't help but laugh at the accurate description. The Jack Grayson in this environment, bantering with his team, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by motorcycle parts, seemed far more authentic than the polished executive she'd imagined him to be. Over the next hour, Jack introduced Elena to several other team members. Engineers, designers, and marketing specialists who all seemed genuinely passionate about the project. By the time they completed the tour, Elena's initial nervousness had given way to excitement about the work ahead. "So," Jack said as they returned to the elevator, "still interested?" "Definitely," Elena replied with more confidence than she'd felt all morning. "It's an amazing project." "Good." He pressed the lobby button. "HR will email you the formal offer letter and paperwork today. Once that's processed, we'll get you set up with building access, company email, all that fun stuff." As the elevator descended, Elena suddenly remembered something. "I should probably tell you, I still have another week on my cleaning contract for this building. It might be a bit awkward." Jack considered this. "I don't see why. You'll be finishing one job and starting another. Nothing unusual about that. Except that I'll be mopping the executive bathrooms 1 week and sitting in meetings the next," Elena pointed out. "Anyone who has a problem with that isn't someone whose opinion matters," Jack replied with unexpected sharpness. Then, his tone softening, he added, "But if it makes you uncomfortable, I can speak to the cleaning service about reassigning you for your final week." "No," Elena said firmly. "I don't want special treatment. I'll finish what I started." Jack's smile returned. "I expected nothing less." As the elevator reached the lobby, he added, "Elena, thank you for taking a chance on us." The phrasing struck her. Isn't it usually the employer taking a chance on the employee? "Not in this case," Jack replied simply. "You're giving up stable, known quantities for something new and untested. That takes courage." Before Elena could respond, the doors opened to the busy lobby. Jack extended his hand formally, aware of the public setting. Welcome to the team, Ms. Ramirez. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Elena shook his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hands-on work despite his executive position. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Grayson. Udo, as she exited the building and stepped into the spring sunshine, Elena felt a curious mixture of exhilaration and terror. She had just upended her carefully structured life based on an unexpected encounter and an opportunity that seemed almost too perfect. Was she being impulsive? Naive? Or was this the kind of chance that came along rarely in life, the kind that might lead to something extraordinary? Her phone buzzed with a text from Tina. "How did it go? Are you hired? Are you rich? Is he hot in person too?" Elena laughed, typing back, "Yes, eventually, and none of your business." As she walked toward the subway station, Elena felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since moving to New York, her future held more promise than struggle. Whether that promise would be fulfilled remained to be seen, but for now, the simple act of taking a chance felt like victory enough. What she didn't yet realize was that accepting this position would lead to far more than professional advancement. In the coming weeks, her path would become increasingly entangled with Jack Grayson's, in ways neither of them could have anticipated, and the boundary between professional and personal would prove far more difficult to maintain than she had imagined. Elena's first day at Grayson Motors arrived more quickly than she had anticipated. After giving notice at both jobs and rearranging her class schedule, the past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation and nervous anticipation. "You look like a proper professional," Tina remarked, as Elena emerged from their shared bathroom in slim black pants and a teal blouse. Another consignment shop find. The corporate world better watch out. "I feel like an imposter," Elena admitted, gathering her hair into a neat ponytail. "What if they realize I'm just a cleaning lady playing dress-up?" Tina rolled her eyes. "You're a physical therapy student with valuable knowledge they need. The cleaning was just how you paid bills, not who you are." Elena wished she could embrace her roommate's confidence. Despite the warm welcome she'd received during her interview, part of her still feared that this opportunity was too good to be true. When she arrived at Grayson Tower, everything felt different. Instead of entering through the service entrance before dawn, she walked through the main lobby at 9 a.m., nodding to Henry as she scanned her new employee badge. Rather than pushing a cleaning cart, she carried a sleek laptop provided by the company. The 30th floor was already buzzing with activity when Elena stepped off the elevator. Dr. Chen spotted her immediately and waved her over to a workstation near a bank of windows. "Your home base," the older woman said, gesturing to a desk equipped with a docking station, large monitor, and ergonomic chair. "I've scheduled a team meeting at 10 to formally introduce you and outline your role in the VA project." Elena set down her things, feeling unexpectedly emotional at having her own space. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. Vivian, please, we're colleagues now." The morning passed in a blur of introductions, system orientations, and project briefings. By lunchtime, Elena's head was swimming with information about adaptive controls, ergonomic designs, and rehabilitation protocols. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" A friendly voice interrupted her thoughts as she stared at her computer screen. Mike Lewis wheeled up beside her desk, 2 sandwiches balanced on his lap. "Thought you might need sustenance. The cafeteria makes a decent turkey club." Elena accepted the sandwich gratefully. "Is it that obvious? I'm feeling out of my depth?" "Everyone does at first," Mike replied with an easy smile. "I spent my first month here convinced they'd realize I was just a guy who liked riding motorcycles, not a qualified test pilot for cutting-edge technology." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Mike spoke again. "So, you're the mystery woman who patched up the boss after his crash. The office has been buzzing about you." Eleanor nearly choked on her sandwich. "What? Why?" Mike grinned. "Jack doesn't typically recruit people personally. Plus, he gestured vaguely. The whole beautiful woman who literally cleaned up his mess angle makes for good office gossip. There's no angle, Elena replied firmly, though she felt her cheeks warm at the beautiful comment. It was a chance encounter that led to a professional opportunity. Nothing more. If you say so, Mike said, his tone neutral, but his eyes twinkling. Just a heads up, there might be some curiosity about your connection to Jack. People here respect him, but they also love to speculate about his personal life. There's nothing to speculate about, Elena insisted. This is strictly professional. Mike held up his hands in surrender. Message received. For what it's worth, I think you'll be great here. We need someone who sees the rider, not just the machine. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Elena's computer. A meeting request from Jack Grayson for 4 p.m. that day. The boss summons, Mike observed with a raised eyebrow. Don't worry, his bark is worse than his bite. I'm not worried, Elena replied, though the flutter in her stomach suggested otherwise. The afternoon passed quickly as Elena reviewed design specifications and safety protocols for the VA project. By the time 4 o'clock approached, she had almost forgotten her nervousness about meeting with Jack. His office on the 30th floor was more modest than the executive suite she'd visited during their first encounter. Glass walls offered transparency rather than privacy, and the space was furnished with practical, comfortable pieces rather than ostentatious displays of wealth. Jack looked up from his computer when she knocked, his face breaking into that now familiar crooked smile. Elena, come in. As she took a seat across from him, Elena couldn't help but notice the changes in his appearance since their last meeting. He looked more tired, with faint shadows under his eyes and a certain tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. How's your first day going? He asked, closing his laptop to give her his full attention. It's been enlightening, Elena replied honestly. Everyone's been very welcoming. Good. Jack leaned back in his chair. Any questions or concerns so far? Elena hesitated, then decided on directness. Just one. Mike mentioned there's been speculation about how I was hired. I'd prefer if people didn't think I got this position for inappropriate reasons. Jack's expression darkened slightly. I'll address that immediately. Your qualifications are what matter, not office gossip. I can handle it, Elena assured him. I just wanted you to be aware. He studied her for a moment, then nodded, noted, and appreciated. Changing tack, he added, the real reason I wanted to meet is to discuss the VA presentation next week. I'd like you to attend. Elena blinked in surprise. Me? But I've barely started. Your perspective would be valuable. These motorcycles aren't just machines, they're therapeutic tools. You understand that aspect better than most of our engineers. He slid a folder across the desk. These are the preliminary designs and safety protocols. I'd appreciate your input, especially regarding how we present the rehabilitation benefits. As they discussed the project, Elena was struck by Jack's passion and attention to detail. This wasn't just a business venture for him. It was personal, meaningful. Your brother, Elena said during a pause in their conversation. Will he be at the presentation? Something flashed in Jack's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or surprise at her remembering. No, David is stationed overseas again. Military contractor now. I'm sorry, Elena said softly. It must be difficult having him far away. Jack shrugged, but the casualness seemed forced. We talk when we can. He's excited about the project, though. Says it's about time his crazy motorcycle obsession did some good in the world. The glimpse of vulnerability humanized him in a way that made Elena's carefully constructed professional boundaries feel suddenly fragile. This wasn't just her boss or a wealthy CEO. This was a man with family he worried about, with passions and purpose. Well, she said, gathering her folder and standing, I should get back to reviewing those specifications. Thank you for the opportunity to be involved in the presentation. Jack stood as well. Thank you for taking a chance on us, Elena. I have a feeling you're going to change things around here, for the better. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, that despite their vastly different circumstances, they shared a common dedication to making a difference. As Elena left his office, she tried to ignore the quickening of her pulse and the warmth that had spread through her chest at his words. This was a professional opportunity, nothing more. She couldn't afford to complicate it with inconvenient feelings or wishful thinking. Yet, as she returned to her desk, Elena couldn't shake the sense that something fundamental had shifted. She had come to Grayson Motors seeking new professional opportunities, but found herself increasingly drawn to the man whose chance encounter had set this all in motion. What she didn't yet realize was that Jack Grayson was experiencing a similar internal struggle, one that would soon complicate both their professional relationship and their carefully separated worlds in ways neither could have anticipated. 3 months into her position at Grayson Motors, Eleanor found herself in uncharted territory, both professionally and personally. The VA project had launched successfully, with her contributions earning praise from both the veterans representatives and the Grayson leadership team. Her class schedule now balanced perfectly with her work hours, and for the first time since moving to New York, her bank account showed a comfortable cushion rather than teetering on the edge of overdraft. What wasn't so comfortably balanced was her relationship with Jack Grayson. "You're staring at your phone again," Tina remarked one Saturday morning as they shared coffee in their tiny kitchen. "Let me guess, another work-related text from your boss?" Elena quickly set her phone face down on the table. "He had a question about the adaptive control design." "At 7:30 on a Saturday?" Tina raised a skeptical eyebrow. "The man runs a multi-million-dollar company. I'm pretty sure he has other people he could ask." "It's a collaborative environment," Elena replied defensively. "Everyone contributes ideas." "Uh-huh." Tina took a deliberate sip of her coffee. "And does everyone get personal texts from the CEO at all hours? Does he invite everyone to private test rides of prototype motorcycles?" Elena winced. The test ride had been purely professional, an opportunity to evaluate the ergonomics of the latest adaptive design. But the exhilaration of speeding along empty roads at dawn, her arms wrapped around Jack's waist, had felt decidedly unprofessional. "We work well together," Elena said simply. "That's all." Tina's expression softened. "Elena, you're my best friend, and I love you, but you're also the most stubborn person I know. It's obvious to everyone except you that there's something happening between you two." "Nothing is happening," Elena insisted, though the warmth creeping up her neck betrayed her. "It can't. He's my boss." "He's technically Vivian's boss," Tina countered. "You report to her, not him." "That's a technicality, and you know it?" Tina shrugged. "All I'm saying is, I haven't seen you this alive in years. You practically glow when you talk about work now, and it's not because you love motorcycle specifications." Before Elena could formulate a response, her phone buzzed again. Despite her best intentions, she couldn't resist checking it. "Jack, emergency meeting with Japanese investors. Need your insight on rehabilitation benefits for international markets. Dinner at Sakagura, 7 p.m. Professional discussion only, I promise." "Let me guess," Tina said dryly, watching Elena's expression. "Another urgent work matter that requires dinner at some fancy restaurant." Elena bit her lip. "It's about the international expansion. The Japanese market has different rehabilitation protocols." "Right," Tina stood, rinsing her mug in the sink. "Well, when this professional relationship finally admits it's something more, just remember I called it months ago." Sakagura was exactly the kind of place Elena had imagined people like Jack frequenting, an upscale Japanese restaurant hidden in the basement of a midtown office building, with soft lighting, private booths, and prices that made her internally wince despite her improved financial situation. She arrived precisely at 7, dressed in a simple black dress that was the most formal item in her wardrobe. The host led her to a secluded corner where Jack was already seated, reviewing documents on his tablet. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart skip, a mixture of appreciation and something deeper, more complex. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to greet her. Then, catching himself, he added, "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "No problem," Elena replied, taking the seat across from him, "though I'm not sure how much help I'll be with Japanese investors." Jack set aside his tablet. "Actually, they cancelled. Their flight was delayed in Tokyo." Elena raised an eyebrow. "So this emergency meeting—" "No longer an emergency," he admitted, having the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "But since you'd already agreed to come, I thought we could still have dinner. To discuss the project, of course." "Of course," Elena echoed, fighting a smile. For the first hour, they actually did discuss work, the international expansion plans, adaptations needed for different markets, and feedback from the initial VA rollout. But as they shared plates of exquisite sashimi and sipped premium sake, the conversation gradually shifted to more personal territory. "So why motorcycles?" Elena asked as Jack poured her another small cup of sake. "Out of all the industries you could have disrupted, why this one?" Something in his expression shifted, a momentary vulnerability that appeared and then disappeared so quickly she almost missed it. "My father was a motorcycle mechanic," he said, setting down the sake bottle. "Had a small shop in Jersey. I grew up surrounded by bikes, the smell of oil, the sound of engines being tuned to perfection." This revelation surprised Elena. Somehow, she'd assumed Jack came from wealth, that Grayson Motors was built on family money and connections. "You never mention your father," she observed. "He died when I was 19, Jack replied, his voice matter-of-fact but with an undercurrent of old pain. "Heart attack in the shop. My brother was deployed at the time, so I dropped out of college to run the business until he came home." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly, resisting the urge to reach for his hand across the table. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Jack shrugged, but his casual gesture couldn't disguise the weight of the memory. "It taught me a lot. About responsibility, about business, about what matters." He took a sip of his sake before continuing. "When David came home on leave, we decided to sell the shop. I used my share to finish my engineering degree, then started developing electric motorcycle prototypes in my garage. And the rest is history," Elena prompted when he fell silent. His crooked smile returned. "Not exactly. There were about 5 years of near bankruptcy, sleeping on friends' couches, and countless failed prototypes before the first Grayson electric motorcycle actually worked. The overnight success took nearly a decade." Elena found herself more drawn to this self-made Jack Grayson than she ever had been to the wealthy CEO image. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" "It never came up in our professional discussions," he replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And that's what we've been so careful to maintain, isn't it? Strictly professional discussions." The question hung between them, charged with all the unspoken tension that had been building over the past months. "Jack," Elena began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say, only knowing that the careful boundaries she'd established were crumbling. "I know," he interrupted, his voice low. "I'm your boss. There are complications, power dynamics, a dozen reasons why this," he gestured between them, "is a bad idea." "Then why are we here?" Elena asked quietly. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," Jack admitted, the directness of his answer catching her off guard. "Not just as a valued team member, though you absolutely are that, but as you, Elena, the woman who didn't take any of my bullshit from the moment we met, who sees me as Jack, not as Grayson Motors." The raw honesty of his confession pierced through all of Elena's carefully constructed defenses. For months, she told herself that her attraction to Jack was one-sided, inappropriate, something to be suppressed and denied. Now, faced with the reality that he felt it too, she found herself at a crossroads. "I can't be a scandal, Jack," she said finally. "I can't be the cleaning lady who slept her way into a corporate job. I've worked too hard for that. Is that what you think I want? An affair to gossip about?" There was hurt in his eyes now. Elena, The sudden ringing of his phone interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Jack glanced at the screen, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "I need to take this," he said apologetically. "It's David." Elena nodded, secretly grateful for the interruption that gave her a moment to collect her thoughts. As Jack stepped away to take the call, she took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. They were colleagues, perhaps friends, but anything more was complicated and risky. And yet, sitting across from him, hearing the story of his struggles and seeing the man beneath the CEO facade, Elena couldn't deny that her feelings had grown far beyond professional admiration. When Jack returned to the table minutes later, his expression was troubled. "Everything okay?" Elena asked. "David's unit was attacked," he said, his voice tight. "He's alive but injured. Being evacuated to Germany, then back to Walter Reed. I need to arrange transport, medical consultations." He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture Eleanor now recognized as a sign of his distress. Without thinking, she reached across the table and took his hand. "Tell me what you need." Jack's fingers tightened around hers, the simple human contact seeming to ground him. "I need to go to him." "Then go," Eleanor said firmly. "The company will survive without you for a few days." "Will you?" Jack began, then hesitated. "The VA project demonstration is next week. Can you handle it with Vivian? You know the rehabilitation aspects better than anyone." "Of course," Elena assured him. "Don't worry about work. Just focus on your brother." Jack nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. Then, still holding her hand, he said, "We need to finish this conversation. About us, when I get back." "Us," Elena repeated softly, the word both thrilling and terrifying. "Yes, I think we do." As they left the restaurant, the evening air cool against her flushed skin, Elena knew that a line had been crossed. Whatever happened next would change everything. Her career, her carefully structured life, and most significantly, her heart. What she couldn't have anticipated was exactly how dramatic that change would be, or how soon it would come crashing into her world. The week following Jack's sudden departure passed in a blur of preparation for the VA demonstration. Elena threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction from her confusing feelings and the uncertainty of where things stood between them. Their conversation at Sakagura had opened a door neither could close again, but Jack's only communication since leaving had been brief updates about his brother's condition and terse instructions for the project. "You're ready for this," Vivian assured Elena as they prepared for the demonstration in the Grayson Motors test facility. "You know this project inside and out." Elena nodded, adjusting the collar of the blazer she'd splurged on for the occasion. Her first truly professional piece of clothing that hadn't come from a consignment shop. "How's Jack doing? Have you heard anything more about David?" Vivian's expression softened. "Surgery went well. David's stable but has a long recovery ahead. Jack's bringing him back to New York tomorrow, planning to have him rehabilitate here where he can be closely involved in his care." "That's good," Elena said, relieved that Jack wouldn't be away much longer. Not that she was counting the days or anything. "He also mentioned you've been instrumental in keeping the project on track," Vivian added with a knowing glance. "He seems to have a lot of confidence in you." Before Eleanor could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, the doors opened and the VA representatives arrived. For the next 2 hours, she immersed herself in demonstrating the adaptive controls, explaining rehabilitation benefits, and answering technical questions with a confidence that would have astonished her former self. "Impressive presentation," the lead VA administrator commented afterward. "Particularly your insights on how these vehicles could integrate with existing physical therapy protocols. We'd like to move forward with an expanded pilot program." As the visitors departed and the team celebrated the successful demonstration, Elena felt her phone buzz in her pocket. A text from Jack. "Heard the demo was a success. Not surprised. Can you meet tomorrow? My place, 7 p.m. Address to follow. Need to talk." Elena stared at the message, her heart racing. This wasn't about work. This was the continuation of the conversation they'd started at Sakagura, the one about us. Good news? Mike asked, rolling up beside her with a knowing smirk. Just Jack checking in about the demo, Elena replied, quickly pocketing her phone. Mike gave her a look that said he didn't believe her for a second. You know, when Jack first told me about hiring you, I thought he was crazy. Not because you weren't qualified, but because I saw the way he looked when he talked about you. I knew then this wasn't just about your professional skills. Mike, Elena began, a warning in her tone. Relax, he said, raising his hands. I'm not judging, just saying sometimes the best partnerships aren't the ones we plan for. They're the ones that blindside us when we're busy making other arrangements. The following evening, Elena found herself standing outside a converted warehouse in Tribeca, triple-checking the address Jack had sent. The industrial exterior gave no hint of the luxury that likely waited inside. This was prime New York real estate, the kind of place featured in architectural magazines. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the buzzer for the penthouse. Elena? Jack's voice came through the intercom, sounding tired but pleased. Come on up. The elevator opened directly into a spacious loft with soaring ceilings, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But it wasn't the spectacular view or the tasteful minimalist decor that caught Elena's attention. It was Jack, standing in the kitchen area, stirring something on the stove. He looked different, more casual in jeans and a faded t-shirt, his hair slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes testifying to the stress of the past week. But when he looked up and saw her, his face transformed with that now familiar crooked smile. You came, he said simply. Of course I came, Elena replied, setting down her purse. How's David? Stubborn, irritable, and already trying to do more than his doctors recommend, Jack said with fond exasperation. So basically himself. He's resting in the guest room. You're cooking? Eleanor asked, nodding toward the stove. Attempting to, Jack admitted. Nothing fancy, just pasta. I thought you might be hungry after work. The domesticity of the scene struck Eleanor powerfully. This wasn't the CEO in his corporate tower or the motorcycle enthusiast in his element. This was just Jack, making dinner in his home, looking simultaneously vulnerable and more real than she'd ever seen him. Vivian said the VA wants to expand the pilot program, Jack continued, returning to his stirring. That's huge for us, and largely thanks to you. It was a team effort, Elena demurred, moving closer to the kitchen. But yes, they seemed impressed, especially with the rehabilitation integration. Jack set down his wooden spoon and turned to face her fully. Elena, I didn't ask you here to talk about work. I know, she said quietly. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken words and possibilities. Then Jack took a step toward her. These past months, working with you, getting to know you. It's changed things for me, he said, his voice low and earnest. Changed how I see the company, the projects, my life outside of work. Jack, please let me finish, he interrupted gently. I've had a lot of time to think this past week, sitting in hospital rooms, watching my brother fight through pain. Life is unpredictable, Elena. The things we think matter, status, appearances, what other people might say, they're nothing compared to finding someone who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway. He took another step closer, close enough now that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. I don't care that we met because you were cleaning my building. I don't care what anyone might say about us. What I care about is that from the moment you bandaged my leg and told me off for being reckless, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. There are complications, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I work for your company. Technically, you work for Vivian, Jack replied with a hint of his usual humor. But if it's a concern, we can find a way to restructure your position. You could report directly to the VA liaison, or we could move you to a different department. You've thought about this, Elena observed, surprised by his thoroughness. Extensively, Jack admitted. I've run through every scenario, every potential complication. Because what I feel for you is worth figuring out the logistics. Eleanor felt the last of her resistance crumbling. For months, she'd held back, telling herself that someone like Jack Grayson couldn't possibly be serious about someone like her, that their worlds were too different, the power dynamics too complex. But standing here in his home, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she finally allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. I've been fighting this since the day you showed up at the diner, she confessed, telling myself it was inappropriate, impossible. And now? Jack asked, hope evident in his voice. In answer, Eleanor closed the distance between them, rising on her tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as Jack's arms came around her, pulling her closer with an intensity that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. So that's a yes to figuring this out together? Elena laughed softly. Yes, but I still have concerns. I've worked too hard to be seen as a professional. If people think I'm getting special treatment because we're involved. Anyone who works with you knows exactly how competent and valuable you are, Jack assured her. But we can be discreet, take things slowly, establish clear boundaries between work and personal life. A sudden burning smell interrupted the moment, and Jack cursed, turning back to the stove where his pasta sauce was now sticking to the pan. So much for my culinary skills, he muttered, removing the pan from the heat. Elena couldn't help but laugh at his dismayed expression. We could order takeout, she suggested. I know a great Thai place that delivers. Jack looked back at her, his expression softening into something warm and intimate. I'd like that. And maybe you could tell me about how the demonstration really went, without the sanitized executive summary. As they settled on the couch with wine glasses, waiting for their food to arrive, Elena was struck by how comfortable it felt, how right, despite all the reasons she'd given herself for why it shouldn't be. What are you thinking? Jack asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That sometimes life takes the strangest detours, she replied honestly. 6 months ago, I was mopping floors at dawn and wondering how I'd ever finish my degree. Now I'm here, with you, working on a project that's actually helping people. Life-changing, isn't it? Jack said softly, taking her hand. Though I think I got the better end of the deal. All you got was a job. I got you. Eleanor smiled, leaning into him slightly. We'll see if you still think that when you meet my mother. She's visiting next month and has very strong opinions about everything. I look forward to it, Jack replied, and the sincerity in his voice made Elena's heart swell. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Jack spoke again, his tone thoughtful. You know, if you hadn't stopped to help me that morning, none of this would have happened. I guess we both took chances on each other, Elena replied. You hiring the cleaning lady, me trusting that it wasn't just some elaborate scheme. Jack laughed, pulling her closer. Best risk I ever took. As the city lights twinkled beyond the windows and the comfortable weight of Jack's arm settled around her shoulders, Elena silently agreed. Her life had indeed changed forever from the moment she'd helped that injured motorcyclist. But the journey had led her not just to professional fulfillment, but to something she hadn't even dared to hope for. A partnership of equals, built on mutual respect, shared passion, and the kind of connection that defied social boundaries and conventional expectations. Sometimes, Eleanor reflected as Jack's lips found hers again, the most extraordinary journeys began with the simplest acts of kindness, and sometimes they led exactly where you never knew you were meant to be all along. What did you think of the story? Share your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What was your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories and have fun.